Kind of rapid fire. Are you ready, Dr. Williams? Could you please comment on the theory that Paul's beliefs on the resurrection of Jesus evolved throughout his epistles?
I suppose I'd need to know what particular theory we're thinking about. Certainly it seems that it's there right from the beginning in terms of what goes on in Galatians. So Galatians chapter 1 will talk about him having encountered Jesus and got his message straight from Jesus, and it's got a 14-year period and a 3-year period. Some people add those two to make 17 years. Some people think the 3 is part of the 14, but that's going earlier than Galatians. So it gets you a long way back. He tells his testimony, or the testimony of Paul is given thrice in the book of Acts, twice told by Paul. So the idea that it evolved, I mean, he believes he encountered Jesus on the Damascus Road. One way people might try and do it is say, well, at first he believed in a spiritual resurrection and later it became more physical. Be careful. When he uses the word spiritual in 1 Corinthians, he's not saying spiritual meaning so you can't touch it. He means spiritual in the sense of not part of the corrupted order. That's what he means.
Okay. What weight do you give to the Shroud of Turin?
I wouldn't give it any weight. I know Gary Habermas does in his arguments for resurrection, but I like to focus on things that are part of the big narrative of early Christianity, not that sort of thing.
How do you answer those who see the difference in accounts as indications that the scriptures are human and not divinely inspired, or at least not inerrant?
Well, I believe that the scriptures are human and divine, so I don't see any problem there. On the question of their complete truthfulness or inerrancy, we need to get the burden of proof in the right place, and someone needs to prove an error if they want to maintain an error, and that means they need to show that there's no possible way that the accounts could fit together. It's not, I don't have to go around proposing one specific model for how two things fit together. Often there are multiple ways that they could fit together, and the problem is we just don't know how.
Is this some of the line of thought you were giving to the idea that there were 6 women, as Dr. Monson said, different lenses, different angles, different ways of seeing things?
Well, yeah, I think what we can have is a greater group of events. People see different things, different angles. Angels are allowed to move. You can have one thing said by one angel and one from another. So what I'd need if someone wants to find what they see is an error is they need to come with a very specific question and
which will be the next one.
Yeah, okay.
I seem to recall a difference in the Gospels over the words written on the sign above Jesus while he was on the cross. Mm-hmm. And in fairness, they then added, I don't have a Bible next to me. I don't remember which accounts. If my question is false, then disregard this.
We can try all 4 accounts. So you do have that wording mentioned in all 4 Gospels. Of course, there are at least 3 languages, Roman, Greek, and let's say Hebrew or Aramaic, involved. And I think you also have the fact that something can be a true record as well as an incomplete record. So it's not that everything that is true has to be maximally complete.
Is there evidence other than the Bible of the soldiers being exonerated for not securing the body of Christ?
No.
The lunar eclipse on Friday in 33 AD is shown from 6 to 7:11 p.m. The Bible has darkness from the 3rd hour to the 6th hour. The Jewish day started at sunset. Wouldn't that move the time of darkness into the next day, Passover?
It all depends what would cause darkness. There is this person, Thales, who seems to put it down to eclipse, and we don't know much about Thales. Julius Africanus, who is a bright chap, writing in the early 3rd century, says, well, that's not very reasonable because you can't get an eclipse at full moon. So I think what causes darknesses during daytime usually are things like dust storms. But I mean, the point is, I don't have to have a particular model of explanation. One can appeal to something completely unparalleled and supernatural, and one can appeal to something natural. I am entirely agnostic. I don't think there's any evidence that would lead us to a specific model.
From a language perspective, would you say that the language requires a 3-hour darkness, or would you say that that might be a time period within which the darkness was experienced?
I think that when we're talking about hours, we've got to remember our hours don't quite equal their hours in the sense that they divide up daylight into 12 sections, and they roughly equivalent to our hours. In John's Gospel, you do get uses of hours other than on 3, 6, and 9. In the Synoptic Gospels, you only get the 3rd hour, the 6th hour, the 9th hour, and in the parable of workers, just at the last minute, the 11th hour. But basically, because people did not have watches, you didn't look up and say, well, it's 5 o'clock or the 5th hour, the 6th hour. You thought, sun's about there, it's the 3rd hour, and the 3rd hour is a whole section. So I don't think it's a question of wanting to be massively precise about this 3rd hour till the 6th hour is a broad chronological range, which would be roughly equivalent to 3 hours of ours, but let's not think of it in using the precision that we have today.
Okay. What day was Jesus crucified on, and was he buried 3 days?
He was crucified on a Friday. And obviously people are thinking about, how can the Son of Man be in the heart of the earth 3 days and 3 nights like Jonah, thinking of Matthew chapter 12. There are different ways of dealing with that. What I can say is the Gospels are very happy to alternate between the phrase after 3 days and on the 3rd day, which for us are different periods. What's more, we can say that sometimes in a language, you can have a time expression which can't be quite analyzed. So does anyone know how to say 2 weeks in French? Okay, we've got 2 weeks, literal translation. Another one, how might you say something happens 2 weeks later? Anyone? No? Anyone heard the phrase 15 days, 15 jours? Yeah? So they say 15 days. That's the way they do it. But actually, if you count back, it's only 14. So there you can have phrases like that which are used. People count things differently. So certainly by our counting, it wasn't 3 days. There are rabbinic sources that talk about a part of a day being counted as a whole day. There are ways you could get 3 days and 3 nights out of it if you wanted to.
I had heard Jesus was born in 3 or 4 BC. Is that right or wrong?
Well, it could be right. The way people work out the birth of Jesus is that in Matthew's Gospel, he is born before Herod the Great dies. In Josephus, we're told that there was a lunar eclipse just before Herod the Great died. Well, there are lunar eclipses in 6 BC, 5 BC, 4 BC, and 1 BC, and people have tended to choose the 4 BC date. And so Herod the Great was born in 4 BC, and therefore Jesus must have been born before that. There are some academic papers nowadays arguing that Herod actually died in 1 BC. The early church tended to date Jesus' birth as 3 or 2 BC. A lot depends on what you do with Josephus' evidence. It's a complex issue if you want to get into it.
Okay, did Mark write his gospel when he went home after Paul fired him?
Whether he did it at home, I mean, the tradition is that he wrote it in Rome. There is one tradition that says Alexandria. So by this stage, he would be back in Paul's desired list.
Here's a question by a 9-year-old. I would
Well
like
done.
to ask you how long you've been studying the resurrection and when you started believing in God.
I've been studying the resurrection, let's say, on and off for quite a while. I was brought up in a Christian family, came to faith around age 12. I'm 41 now. I started thinking about this lecture seriously 6 months ago. But I've been thinking about the subject on and off for longer. But good start when you're 9.
With such a wonderful blessing and love for varying languages regarding God's Word, how do you reconcile so many variant English-specific translations? King James, New King James, New American Standard, NIV, with the need for accuracy of information God intended for mankind and all nations to understand it. And in fairness, I should let you know, Peter is on the committee for translating the English Standard Version.
Thank you. Well, what I'd say is the best. I think I gave this same answer last year. The best Bible translation to have is the one you read the most, that I don't think there's a problem with there being lots of translations. In fact, the fact that you can go and travel in different countries and speak to Christians who speak different languages and find that they believe the same sort of things is because they're reading the same Bible. So actually, the differences between all of the translations are not very great. There are, of course, some differences of style, some more literal, some more archaic, some more contemporary. And you could say that you can have different translations for different purposes. I think it's good to have a translation that you can go deep with and really study the word closely.
In Matthew 28:1, is the word for Sabbath singular or plural in the original language? You know what I'm getting at, ...
So it's, the Greek is opse de sabbaton, so it's plural. I take that to mean the Sabbath, I take it to mean after the Sabbath. So I suppose the first word is it after the Sabbath or late on the Sabbath? There is an early church tradition that reads Matthew's Gospel as talking about the late Saturday evening, and I don't go with that.
Okay, we'll try and wrap this up. I'm not able to read through all of these, and I'm so sorry for everybody, but people have been so patient, you've got to be getting sore. What is the state of the church in England today?
In God's care.
It's the same as the church all over the world. What influence did Josh McDowell have in your life?
I read his Evidence That Demand a Verdict sometime when I was like 14 or 16. I haven't read anything since, but, it was good at the time.
Can you explain why this is not another Corn King myth?
Corn King myth. If someone explained to me what a Corn King was, I might be able to, but if they did, I might not.
Okay, that's probably someone from Iowa. We might ought to ask this of Monson, but I'll serve it up to you. Do currently published Talmuds include the reference in Sanhedrin 43a, or is it left out?
We get it from the facsimile. There is a facsimile available of the Munich Talmud, which has that text in. I think the Sonkino does not.
Okay. Does the Greek word used in the Great Commission mean as you go?
Poreuthentes, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
A little background to this question. There's a group of scholars who think that Matthew and Luke wrote their Gospels off of Mark and some unknown gospel that they just call Q. So with that background, what's your view on the Q source relating to Synoptic Gospels?
Well, one of the things about this idea is people can mean different things by Q. For some people, it's simply shorthand for anything which is common to Matthew and Luke, which isn't in Mark. For other people, it's something they really believe existed as a document, and some people, and I've met some of these, believe that they can isolate different stages of Q, and there was a Q community, and they can describe its geographical knowledge, and there are 3 different stages of Q, Q1, 2, and 3, and so on. Some people take that a bit far. I like to study documents that can actually be seen rather than which are hypothetical. I'm not saying it didn't exist. I'm just saying I don't know whether it's very fruitful use of energy to think about it. So I try and make my apologetics for the Gospels independent of whether you subscribe to that theory or not. My point is just working with the text as it stands. There's internal evidence which could work on a number of different theories.
I'll ask the last question. Before I do that, 2 of these questions I'll tell you we're not dealing with. One is the reliability of Porphyry's criticism of the dating of the book of Daniel that makes it a book of history rather than prophecy. We don't have life groups or Sunday school tomorrow, but we do a week from tomorrow. and we'll be dealing with that in my class. So if you want an answer, come back. I'm not going to do this one either, because this is just Jeff Hargis wanting someone to say hello to you. Instead, my last question will be mine. Would you please tell, and not in a, he won't brag on himself, but I want you to understand the quality of scholar in the eyes of the world that you've had today. There is a palimpsest, which you can explain what is, but Peter has recently been asked to do he's been, in essence, given a 5-year exclusive request and authorization to do the very first translation on this full palimpsest that dates to the 5th or 6th century, I believe. This is an amazing honor that will make Peter probably the world's greatest authority on Palestinian Christian Aramaic once he's done.
Certainly not now.
Yeah. Peter, would you just tell everybody what it is you're doing?
Well, how many of you have heard of Hobby Lobby? Okay. Well, the family who own that have got involved in buying biblical manuscripts, and they acquired one, in fact, from Cambridge a little while ago, and they are now partnering with people to get those published through something called the Green Scholars Initiative. And so they're going to be allowing Tyndale House to work on this manuscript. And it's one of those things that, because of the shortage of writing material back then, people would get something that's already got writing on, scrub off the writing, and then write something else on top. We want to get at the writing they've scrubbed off. Okay, and to do that, we need some good images, because it's actually, this manuscript has got the greatest collection of Jesus' sayings in something similar to the dialect he would have spoken in Aramaic that there is in the world. It's a translation from the Greek. It's not more original than our Bibles, but it's something that's still useful. And so I'm going to try and work at that. I don't think I will become the world's leading scholar in 5 years. It might take longer than that for this very narrow area. The idea is that you know more and more about less and less until eventually you know everything about nothing. And that's scholarship.
So with that, would you join me in thanking Peter again?
Thank you, my friend.